So the comic book movie that fans have been waiting for, what, like 2 years now, is finally here. James Gunn's Superman, the start of a brand new cinematic universe for DC Comics. Following the collapse of the Snyderverse, this movie had a lot riding on it. This movie had, it's the origin of a brand new cinematic universe for DC, and if it fails, that pretty much puts a wrap on any efforts that James Gunn has going forward in trying to craft this universe. And if you've seen my non-spoiler review, you know that I really like this movie, though. But that wasn't always a guarantee. Like a lot of people, I had my doubts that DC could make another good Superman movie after they screwed up the Snyderverse. Although I will say, I never thought Man of Steel was a terrible film, but it fell short of really understanding the Superman character. And even though I was concerned as to whether someone like James Gunn, who is known for his very edgy humor, would be able to really capture the spirit of Superman, I am happy to say that James Gunn does understand Superman and what he is supposed to be and what he is supposed to represent. And the Superman that we get in this movie is strong, he's noble, compassionate, has a heart for all living creatures, and always strives to do what is right and good, even if others disagree with him. And it's been a while since we got a live-action depiction of this type of Superman. Really, we haven't seen this, at least in film version, since the Christopher Reeves Superman. And all this to say that the film isn't perfect. It does have some weaknesses. The biggest weakness is really around the world building and the background lore of this new universe, which is not really something you want to skip out on when this movie is supposed to be the start of a new cinematic universe. But we'll get into all of that later in the video. It is at this point that I am going to start delving into spoilers, so if you haven't seen Superman, go out and see it for yourself first. I think overall you will enjoy it, and then come back and watch this review. Alright, so full spoiler territory. We're going to dive into it right now, so you have been warned. So this movie, the way that it started off, my initial reaction to it honestly was not very good. The movie just kind of throws you right into this new universe with very minimal backstory. It literally explains in text format that metahumans began showing up on Earth around 300 years ago, and then it explains that 3 decades ago the Kents found a baby Kal-El on their farm. 3 years ago, Superman revealed himself to the world, and 3 hours ago, he lost his first battle against a supervillain known as the Hammer of Baravia, who is supposedly an agent of the fictional authoritarian nation of the same name, whose invasion of another fictional nation, Jar Hunpar, I'm probably mispronouncing these names like crazy, was halted by Superman like 3 months prior. Which takes us to the opening scene, the one we saw from the trailer with Superman lying beaten in the Arctic and carried off to the Fortress of Solitude by Krypto the Superdog. Now, I was ready to hate this opening because it felt kind of lazy to have so much backstory for not just Superman, but the world building of this universe glossed over in just a few lines of text. But then I realized, just moments later, while I was sitting there watching the movie in theater, wait a minute, Jesker, aren't you being a hypocrite? Because this is exactly how Star Wars A New Hope, the original Star Wars movie, starts off and introduces us to its world and its background. And I love Star Wars, so realizing my own hypocrisy, I pulled back and said, okay, let's wait and see how this plays out. And for the most part, even though this isn't an origin story for Superman, the movie still does a good job of explaining the origin of Superman. We don't see Krypton or the destruction of Krypton or 15 to 20 minutes of him growing up on the farm with Ma and Pa Kent, but through what I thought was cleverly inserted exposition, you do get the origin of Superman explained throughout the film. I can't say they do as good of a job explaining the world building and the history of metahumans, but again, we'll get to that later. So at the Fortress of Solitude, Superman heals up, we get introduced to his robot helpers, we get Krypto the Superdog, who, like all young pups, is an asshole, but a lovable asshole nonetheless, and really steals the show in quite a few scenes in this movie. We also get a holographic message from Superman's biological Kryptonian parents, where they explain they are sending him to Earth because Krypton is dying and they believe Earth is the place that he can do the most good. But that's only half the message. The other half of the message, which was damaged during baby Clark's journey to Earth. And that other half of the message is a major plot point of the film. But this is the first example of what I was talking about before, with giving us the origin of Superman without wasting screen time to show it for like the umpteenth time. In that through this scene and the exposition of the message from his parents, you get the basic gist of the reason that Kal-El was sent to Earth in the first place and why he is a superhero in the first place. It's to honor the final wishes of his biological parents, or at least what he believes their final wishes to be. So that being said, a healed-up Superman returns to Metropolis to fight the Hammer of Baravia, but because he's only 83% healed or something like that, he gets his ass handed to him. We then learn that the Hammer of Baravia was in fact working for Lex Luthor, and Luthor is in league with the president of Baravia to take over Jarhanpur for his own sinister desires. At the same time, Lex sent out a spy, a woman known as the Engineer, who manipulates these small robots known as nanites to find the Fortress of Solitude, while the Hammer of Baravia acted as a distraction. And this is where I want to begin talking about Lex Luthor and his portrayal by Nicholas Hoult. Like I said in the non-spoiler review, I think this is the best live-action version of Lex Luthor that we have ever seen on screen. This version of Luthor has plans within plans within plans, layered on top of plans, which really demonstrates the evil genius of Lex in a way that we haven't seen fully explored in live action until now. Because the defeat of Superman at the hands of the Hammer of Baravia not only was a distraction so he could find the Fortress of Solitude, but it was also to tarnish Superman's public image as this invincible hero. And it's all part of an even larger scheme involving these two nations that we get into later in the movie. This Luthor is scary smart, and honestly is the most competent version of the character we have seen in live action. Now I want to kind of jump into Lois and Clark's relationship. So in the movie, Lois and Clark are already dating. She knows that Superman is Clark Kent. They don't do the thing of him hiding his identity from her and her discovering who he really is. No, we are to assume that all of that took place during the 3 years that he has been fighting crime as Superman. And to be honest with you, I would be fine with this if they bothered to explain at all how we got to this point. When did she first suspect that Clark is Superman? When did he decide to reveal the truth to her? Or how did she discover the truth? What was the moment that they fell in love? And it's not like we had to make that a major focus of the film. I would have just liked at least one scene of them going out on a date somewhere and Lois says, "Oh, this is where you took me to safety after you rescued me from Lex Luthor for the first time. And this is where we stopped lying you about your identity and me about my feelings for you and his feelings for her." And then maybe Superman reveals in this conversation that this is also the first time that Lex Luthor targeted Superman using Lois as bait or something, just to flesh out Lex and Superman's history a bit more. And that can allow them to also go into why Lex hates Superman so much and what Clark thinks about Lex Luthor. You know, something like that. A scene like that, just maybe 2 or 3 minutes added to the movie, would have been good enough to fix this particular issue. It would have been good enough. It would have been enough background information on the romantic relationship between these two. But thankfully, I will say what really does save the romance, in spite of not really knowing its particular history in this particular universe, is that these actors, David Corenswet and Rachel Brosnahan, have amazing chemistry on screen. Remember how everyone said that Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone had this fantastic chemistry in the Amazing Spider-Man movies? Well, the chemistry between this Lois and Clark, I have to say, is on that same level. Like, you really believe that these two are a couple and have been a couple for a while and are really in love with one another. So even though you don't get the backstory on how their romance came to be, through the chemistry alone, you can see how and why these two ended up together, which goes to one of the major positives of this movie, in that this film, I think, is perfectly cast, up and down. Honestly, I don't think there was a single character in the movie that I thought was miscast. Every single actor feels like the character from the comic books. I never felt like I was seeing so-and-so actor playing so-and-so character. I felt like I was watching Superman, Lois Lane, Lex Luthor, the characters in this story on screen. And when one actor is able to make you forget that they are an actor playing a character, that is incredible work on the part of the actor. When the whole cast is able to do that, it is a true testament to the brilliance of the director. In this case, that obviously being James Gunn, because it shows that he knew what kind of actor was needed to convincingly portray all of these characters and have them work in synergy so well with each other. And also, before I forget, this version of Jimmy Olsen is hilarious. He's a player out here getting so much love from the ladies. Even Lex Luthor's girlfriend turns on Lex to help Jimmy out. Shout out to my man Jimmy getting the respect he deserves. But yeah, I think this movie was perfectly cast. Everybody works so well with each other. There's chemistry between all of these actors, all these characters. They do feel like the characters from the comic books. And to be able to pick a cast that perfectly and have them work together so well, you gotta give James Gunn props for that. So continuing on with the plot of the film, there's a mock interview that Lois does with Superman, where we get more exposition on his origin and his backstory. And again, the exposition is cleverly done here because not only do we get more of Clark's history, but this whole scene served a dual purpose of getting us into the mindset of Clark himself, because Lois isn't really sure if Clark should have interfered in the conflict between Baravia and Jarhanpur, because it wasn't legal, and technically Baravia is an ally of the United States, even though they're a corrupt nation. But Clark doesn't care, because if he didn't step in, innocent people would have been slaughtered. And there is this conflict in the movie of what is legal versus what is moral. And I'm glad the movie I am glad the movie did not fence sit on this debate. It does by the end take a solid stance on one side in regards to legality versus morality. And the movie and Superman himself falls clearly on the side of morality. Superman is guided by something larger than politics or the law. He's motivated by a higher sense of justice, truth, morality, and trying to make a better world. So this isn't the Superman that is all about the American way. No. This is the better world Superman, which I'm completely fine with, because I think that is a much better evolution of the character. And let's be honest, even in the comics, it was never about Superman representing the American way. That was always propaganda material that was tied to World War II and Cold War efforts. It was in the 78 Christopher Reeves Superman film, but it wasn't a comic book thing. The idea that this alien hero would be this tool or agent of one Earth government, the United States, and not this agent for the good of the whole world. It's kind of silly when you think about it. So I'm glad this Superman is a Superman that embraces all of humanity and the whole world, and will always put morality above legality or the whims of the government. That is the portrayal of Superman that we got, and I think it is a much more powerful statement with this particular Superman. So of course we find out later that this whole conflict between Baravia and Jarhanpur was manipulated by Lex Luthor to ultimately put Superman into a position that the public and the government would turn on him, because Luthor, in his egomania, wanted to become king of Jarhanpur and make him to this techno-tyranny state. Some people have also said that the conflict between these two nations is a commentary on the conflict between Israel and Gaza, or Russia and Ukraine. And if you look hard enough, if you squint your eyes, you can kind of see it, but I think it's veiled enough that if you want to see it that way, you can. But I think it also just echoes other geopolitical conflicts, not just going on today, but just throughout history as well. And again, I'm glad it didn't shy away from topics like this, because art is often an imitation of reality, and fiction is a really good way to discuss such heated topics, because you can express an opinion or stance on a topic like this without directly referring to the real world parties involved in that debate. Which is why it's more effective getting this message across using two fictional nations rather than two real ones. Because if you use the real world nations, people will come into the conversation with their own pre-established biases, whereas they're more open to what you have to say if you use fictional ones. And thus, I think the messaging here, which is that like Superman, we should try to have a larger view of humanity, a global view of humanity, and the world beyond just politics and borders, and embrace this higher sense of right and wrong that transcends all of that. And I think because the message did go with using two fictional nations instead of two real world ones, it will have more of an impact because of that. And that's not the only political message you can take away from the film. There is another major one that we'll get to later on towards the end of the film, but we'll get to that when we get to it. The next big thing that happens in the movie is that Metropolis is under attack by a giant monster, and Superman gets help taking it down by the Justice Gang, consisting of Guy Gardner, Green Lantern, Hawkgirl, and Mr. Terrific. And they're fighting this thing rather haphazardly, while Superman is being more cautious, making sure to save even the lives of animals like a dog and a squirrel, which again is so wholesomely Superman to show just how much he cares about preserving life. Again, we get to see the compassion and the love for life and the whole world and how deep that runs with him. And it truly is inspiring, which is what Superman is supposed to be. He's supposed to be inspiring. He is the Superman. He is the embodiment of morality that we should all strive for. Even if we can never be as good as him, we will still become better people in trying to be as good as Superman. Just the act of trying will make us better. And that's what I think James Gunn and David Corenswet really captured so well with the character in this movie. I mean, Superman doesn't even want to kill the monster if he doesn't have to. He would rather imprison it in space or something instead. But anyways, it turns out that the monster was just a distraction so that Lex and his cronies could invade the Fortress of Solitude, where they destroy the Superman robots, they capture Krypto, and they ended up deciphering the rest of the message left by Superman's Kryptonian parents. And it turns out not to be what Superman thought it was. His parents didn't send him to Earth to save and guide it. They sent him to conquer and to rule it. And Lex displays this message for all the world to see, and the public turns on Superman, beginning to see him as a threat. And this leads to a couple of points that I want to talk about here. First of all, where did Lex Luthor get this monster? I know that in this universe, metahumans, the supernatural, gods and monsters, it's a well-known and established thing in this world. But the problem is, for a lot of casual moviegoers, people who aren't comic book nerds, this is a lot for average movie watchers to take in and just accept. And to me, this is the biggest weakness of the film, which is its lack of world building. When did these teams of heroes start forming? When did metahumans first don costumes and secret identities? When did they first really, start becoming more active in crime fighting? There's a lot of history here that is just left unexplained, and we're just left to fill in the gaps. And I'm not saying we needed every minute detail of the history of metahumans in this universe. Obviously, there will be other films in this universe to flesh that out. But we did need the basics, and we needed more of the basics than what this film provides. I could imagine they could have had a scene where Lex is talking about how much he hates metahumans, and he explains something like, oh, there has always been these anomalies throughout human history, but up until 3 centuries ago, they were regarded as myths and legends, the stuff of fairy tales. But the more the world became connected, the more their existence couldn't remain in the shadows. And by the time of the 20th century, they were working with our governments, fighting against what they deem as evil, and forever altering the course of human history. Their presence is loathsome enough, But now this alien freak appears out of nowhere, and the public gives him undue adoration, ignoring the triumphs of mankind. My triumphs. I won't live in the shadow of this invader any longer. Superman must die. You know, a scene like that would have given us a basic timeline and a basic understanding of how this world where metahumans are commonplace and accepted by the public came to be. We can fill in the gaps of that timeline later, but we needed the basic structure of it in this film. And sadly, we don't really get that. And that, more than anything, I feel was the biggest flaw of the movie, especially considering that this is supposed to be the film that establishes this new universe. But I will say, James Gunn gained enough goodwill with me for everything he did right in the movie that I'm willing to see how he goes about rectifying this mistake in the future movies in this universe. The other point that I wanted to bring up from this part of the film is that I've seen reviews online criticizing how quickly the public turned on Superman because of the message from his parents. And I honestly got to ask, why is this a problem? Why is this so unbelievable to reviewers? This is how people in the modern day really are. Like, how many times have we seen someone build up a lifetime of credibility and public goodwill, and then one bad thing comes along and suddenly they're canceled, they're made a pariah? Like, this response from the public, it's not unrealistic. Again, art imitating reality. People can be very easily duped and can turn on a celebrity, which Superman is a celebrity in this world. And they can turn on a celebrity in a heartbeat. I don't find that to be so unrealistic. Now, is it right? Was the response warranted? Of course not. After 3 years of doing nothing but good for people, Superman should have been given the benefit of the doubt. And that would have been the logical thing for people to do, but most people aren't logical. Most people don't think things through. They are reactionary and impulsive. So this is very believable to me. Even though I don't agree with the response, this doesn't seem out of the norm for most people today. I think a lot of the people criticizing this part of the film really have too much faith in their fellow human being and the ability of people to resist their worst impulses. That's a sad statement, but let's just keep it real. Social media has shown it to be true. But moving on. So Superman turns himself into the government, and we find out that Lex has created his own pocket universe where not only does he have Superman and Krypto locked up, but also other metahumans and political prisoners of Lex's allies, and honestly just people that have pissed Lex Luthor off. He even has one of his ex-girlfriends in there, which is bonkers. Again, like, his ego knows no limits in this movie. And again, this is where I feel like we needed another scene to flesh things out a bit, because I was sitting there asking myself, okay, where did Lex get the technology to create the pocket universe? I understand that Lex is a super genius, but creating a pocket universe? That sounds like some alien tech to me. That sounds like, well, to be honest, it sounds like the Phantom Zone. Like, what is this whole, pocket universe thing? And again, it reminded me of the Phantom Zone. And I just think, again, add in an extra scene of him reverse engineering some alien tech to create these portals to this pocket universe, or working with some metahuman or something else to create this. Again, just a very brief scene would have sufficed to make this more believable to the audience, I think. But regardless, we learned that Lex has apparently run out of his kryptonite reserves, presumably using all the kryptonite that could be found on Earth in previous schemes against Superman. But because he has custody of Metamorpho is able to change his body into kryptonite to keep Superman weakened and imprisoned. And if Metamorpho doesn't obey him, Lex will kill his son. Literally, Lex Luthor threatens to kill a baby in this movie. When I said in my non-spoiler review that this is the scariest Lex Luthor we have seen in live action, I wasn't kidding. This guy is dark. He's dark, he's cruel, he's twisted, he only cares for himself. There is a scene where he holds a gun to this random guy that owned a falafel stand that Superman saved one time, and he threatens him with Russian roulette unless Superman answers his questions. And on the second shot, Lex straight up blows his brains out. My jaw dropped. I wasn't expecting the movie to go that dark with Lex Luthor, but holy shit, they went there. And seeing the lengths that Lex will go to destroy Superman, it really captures just how much he hates Superman. And that's why I think this is the most accurate and best live-action Lex Luthor that we have ever seen. So, Metamorpho, being sick of Lex's shit, and is able to conjure a yellow sun in the palm of his hand in order to heal Superman, allowing Superman to save his baby, to break him and Krypto out of the pocket dimension, and to meet up with Lois and Mr. Terrific, who is also one of the standout characters of the film. Lois went earlier to the Justice Gang to get them to help break out Superman. And again, we see this legality versus morality debate on display as Green Lantern and Hawkgirl try to stay on the side of the law, whereas Mr. Terrific says, screw that, and helps Lois break into Lex's pocket universe. And given his tech savvy, Mr. Terrific honestly was one of the best characters in the film. Like, I kind of want to see a Mr. Terrific spinoff, to be honest with you, because I really enjoyed him in this movie. I really did. So Lois takes Clark and Krypto back to the Kent's farm where he heals up. And Mr. Terrific stays behind to close the portal to Lex's pocket dimension. However, at this point, with Superman escaping, Lex has gone completely off the deep end. I mean, he's completely gone bonkers. He's gone mad. And he forces the portal back open, and it begins to form a crack in the fabric of reality across the entire planet. Meanwhile, Lex gives the go-ahead for Baravia to invade Jar Humpur. Superman rushes to Metropolis to stop the crack from spreading, but has to fight the Engineer, the Hammer, Lex's goons, and it looks like he's not going to be able to save Metropolis in time to stop the invasion of Jar Humpur. But this is when Green Lantern and Hawkgirl finally choose morality over legality, and they, along with Metamorpho, arrive to stop the invasion while Superman deals with Lex's goons. And it is revealed that the Hammer is actually a clone of Superman known as Ultraman. And this also explains how Lex broke into the Fortress of Solitude earlier in the movie, because you can only get in there if you have Superman's DNA. And of course, having a clone of Superman, Lex has access to Superman's DNA. So Ultraman, while having the strength of Superman, Ultraman doesn't have the brains of Superman, instead having to be given orders by Lex to actually fight. Superman realizes this and cuts the communications between Lex and Ultraman, allowing Superman to outsmart Ultraman and send him flying into the crack in reality. And so with Ultraman finally out of the way, Superman is able to confront Lex Luthor directly. And while he confronts Lex, Mr. Terrific is able to use Lex's technology to close the crack in reality. And this is where we probably get the most epic scene in the entire movie. Superman explains that even though he is an alien from another world, he was raised as a human. He lives as a human. He shares in our struggles, and most importantly, our uncertainties. And even though he does make mistakes, he wakes up every single day trying to do the right thing. And he hopes that someday Lex will learn to do the same thing. Lex will learn to be an actual human being. And you just see Lex Luthor realize just how small, how less of a person he is than Superman. Not because of Superman's incredible powers and abilities, but because Superman really is a morally superior character to Lex Luthor. A morally superior person in every possible way. He's more human than Lex, despite being an alien. And with this realization, Lex Luthor has a crash out of epic proportions, which is interrupted when Krypto goes crazy on this guy, just slinging him around like crazy, man. And I was in the theater like, hell yeah, get him, good boy. Because throughout this entire movie, you really come to hate Lex Luthor. And it's really cathartic to see this verbal beatdown on him from Superman and the literal one from Krypto. Now, this was the other political issue that I mentioned earlier, and some have taken this scene as a pro-immigration message and criticizing those that are anti-immigration and want harsher immigration policies. And I do think that may have very well been the intention behind this scene. And look, here's what I'll say. This is my stance on it. Greatness can come from anywhere, from any country, or I guess in this case, any planet. And if you find that to be a threat, like Lex Luthor does, then I think that says more about your own inadequacies and shortcomings than it does about the people that you're trying to demonize just because of their place of origin and where they came from. And like Superman told Lex, it just shows your own fear and ignorance. Again, this goes to what I think is one of the broader messages of this film. And that is, like Superman, we need to love and appreciate and embrace humanity as a whole, regardless of borders or language or whatever. And in this case, the most human of all of us is an alien from Krypton. And that's a very powerful message. That's a very powerful symbol. And it really represents the universality of the Superman character. So I love the message. All right. I love the message. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. But continuing on with the movie, Lex Luthor's corruption and his dealings with the president of Baravia is revealed to the public. And by the way, there's this scene in the movie where Hawkgirl straight up kills the president of Baravia. And I thought that scene was funny as hell, man. Like, Hawkgirl, first of all, I think Hawkgirl is probably the most beautiful actress in the entire movie. I'm not going to lie to you, bro. But also, I love that scene. I love that scene with Hawkgirl. I thought it was funny as hell, man. But anyways, Lex's corruption is revealed. His image is ruined. He's arrested, and everything collapses around him to the point that he is in tears. And it's a satisfying end for what I think is the most evil Lex that we've seen in live action. Obviously, he's not dead, so he'll be coming back in a future film for sure. But yeah, it was very cathartic seeing what happens to Lex Luthor at the end of this movie. Now, speaking of future films and future villains, as far as future Superman villains go, I think there is a setup for two big ones. Ultraman is completely brainless, and he doesn't die, and he gets sent through a crack in reality to God only knows where. I think there is a possibility that they could be setting him up to come back in a future film as Bizarro. Something could happen to him in the space between universes or in an alternate universe to where he could come back and become a version of Bizarro, which would be cool to see because we've never really gotten Bizarro in a live-action Superman film. The other possibility, and this is going to tie into the ending of the movie. This is a good segue to the ending of the movie. But the movie portrays Jor-El and Lara, Superman's biological parents, as being evil and wanting Superman to conquer Earth. But if you know anything about the comics, that doesn't seem like Jor-El or Lara at all. But it does sound like someone else from Krypton, and of course I'm talking about General Zod. Now, they stress in this movie that the message Lex released to the public was not altered in any way by Lex Luthor. All these computer experts on Earth confirmed it. However, what if it was altered? Not by Lex Luthor, but by someone not from Earth. What if, before Jor-El sent Kal-El to Earth, General Zod edited his parents' message in order to influence and control Kal-El and prepare Earth for a coming invasion from General Zod to make it into a new Krypton? Would computer experts from Earth really be able to tell, really be able to decipher if it was altered by alien technology? I think there's enough ambiguity there to where this could be a setup to bring in General Zod in a sequel at some point. But the problem that I do have with that comes in the form of the ending of the film, where we get a surprise cameo from Kara, Supergirl, Superman's cousin. And we find out in this universe that Kara and Clark are already aware of each other. They seem to have a pretty tight bond, and it turns out that this entire time that Clark was watching Crypto for Kara, and she's actually Crypto's true owner. And she's been off on other planets partying and getting drunk. And that kind of explains why Crypto is such an asshole in this movie, because his real owner has never really trained him. And I'm not going to lie, it's kind of an interesting spin on Supergirl. I'm kind of curious to see how her movie is going to turn out. But the real problem in this is that, does Kara know the truth about Krypton? Like, shouldn't she know if her aunt and uncle were bad people wanting to conquer Earth? Shouldn't she be able to tell Clark everything he needs to know about Krypton and his parents and what they were like? So why is it such a mystery to Clark? Clark already knowing about the existence of his cousin raises a lot of questions that, even as I record this, I'm not really sure how to approach. So I think I'm just going to end it there for now, and we'll speculate on this in a future video or a future live stream. But yeah, man, that's my review of James Gunn's Superman. Overall, despite some flaws that it has, despite some issues with the movie, I overall really enjoyed it. I really liked it. I had a lot of fun with it. I think it nails the character from the comics pretty damn well. Certainly better than what we saw in the Snyderverse. And any issues that I do have with the movie, James Gunn has earned enough goodwill from me to where I'm willing to stick with this universe and see how he corrects these issues in future films. Overall, I would probably give this movie a solid 8 out of 10. And I would definitely recommend that you go and watch it, and I would love to hear your thoughts about it in the comments down below. Now, I will be over at my friend's Wizard of Wordplay's channel this Wednesday to talk about this movie some more on his live show. Go check out his channel and be sure to subscribe to him. And I will also be doing my own Superman live stream this coming Thursday. We're going to have our boy Andrew Rowland on there with me, hopefully some others as well. And we'll be talking about this movie in more detail. That's going to be this Thursday. I'm going to be on Wizard's channel this coming Wednesday. And yeah, until the next one, be sure to subscribe, like, click that bell, share to others, become a patron over on Patreon, and if you feel extra generous, there are various ways for you to donate to the channel directly. All of your support is much appreciated. This is JeskerJames, and I am signing out.